Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this class. My name is Ibuka Ibrahim. You guys know me as Buka on Slack. All right, so today we'll be talking about setting up an HTTP server, a practical approach. All right, so can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go on. We can hear you.
All right, sorry about that. Before I start this class, I would like to, inform you guys that this is for NodeJS. So if you are currently watching this class and you signed up for front end, well, you can follow up because basically what we'll be doing here is basic JavaScript. But this was tailored for backend JavaScript. So guys doing Node.js, this is for you. All right, so if you are currently watching, I hope you have installed on your system Node.js. If you haven't, please go over to your browser and download Node.js right now. And also VS Code because we'll be coding live too. Okay, so let's begin. Let me start by explaining some concepts for you because to understand what we're about to code, you have to, understand how servers work. So, clients and servers. Okay, so when we browse a website, for example, when you go to google.com, you are basically asking for data. So you type in google.com. By simply typing in google.com on your browser, you are requesting for a data or for data on the Google servers. So the client, which is the browser, sends a request to the server, and then the server handles that request and sends back to the client. So your client, which is basically your browser, it could be your laptop browser or your phone browser, wherever, sends a request to the server, and then the server processes that request, or the Google server processes that request, and then sends back the request as a response to the clients. So here is a basic diagram of how that process works. So here we have a drawing of a client right here. So the client sends a request to the server processes that request and then sends back a response. So for instance, if we type in google.com, behind the scenes is what is going on right here. So the server processes that request and then sends it back. So we're able to view whatever response the server sends back to us. But how do these two sites communicate with each other? Because they are basically two computers with different languages. So how do they basically communicate with each other? So they communicate with each other with something that is known as protocols. So protocols are sets of communication rules that two sides agree to use when communicating. So a basic example is if you have two individuals trying to communicate, for example, maybe two Nigerians trying to communicate. So in Nigeria, we have over more than 200 languages in Nigeria. So how would two Nigerians basically communicate with each other? So if the two of them know Pidgin English, they might decide to, go and speak Pidgin English with themselves. Or if they know normal English, they might decide to speak normal English between themselves, irrespective of their individual languages. The client and the server can agree to communicate through a particular set of rules known as a protocol. So that's what I basically explained right now. So with protocol, these two computers can basically speak to each other. So each computer or a server can be identified by its own unique IP address. So you've probably been hearing about IP address, IP address, IP address. So when these two computers, that's the client and the server, try to communicate, they communicate by connecting to their IP addresses. So the client connects to the IP address of the server. So by doing this, the server opens up a channel which is known as sockets between these two computers. So, and sends information through these sockets. In this diagram right here, or in this picture right here, we have, this is basically how servers look like. So, like I said, servers are computers. They are very, very huge computers in a room, which never go off. So they are basically on 247. So you can set up a server locally in your room if you like, but it is quite expensive. And if you are setting that up, you have to know that, of course, NEPA must not take lights. So there must be no power outage at all. So the server would always be on 247. So basically, this is how a server looks like. So like I said, the server tries to, or the client tries to connect to the server through an IP address. So the IP, while connecting to the server, it creates a socket through which it sends data or information back to the client. So these are different clients right here connecting to this particular server. So the information sent is structured through different protocols. So for example, we have HTTP or FTP. These protocols are the different languages the computers can speak. So I use an example of two Nigerians trying to speak with each other. So if one speaks Igbo, the other speaks Yoruba, how would an Igbo man and a Yoruba man communicate? So they can probably speak English. So if they can both speak English, they decide to use English to communicate with each other. So now a server and a client can decide to use HTTP or FTP to communicate with each other. So FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. We won't be talking about that right now for today. What we'll be talking about will be HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So this is what the server uses to transfer basically your HTML documents to the browser. So Node provides us with the ability to access these functionalities between these two systems, which is the client and the server. So it accesses these functionalities and then sends information between them. So when we run NodeJS on the server, we can tell Node what information we want to send to our clients when they make a particular request. So let's talk about ports. So once a server is created, or once a connection is created on the server, how does Node know what particular client is trying to access information? So Node tries to do this through ports. So Node.js and all other programs on the server listen through a particular port number. If Node.js is listening for a request on that port, it will respond, else it will not respond. So a typical port looks like this. So you have right here the IP address or the IP number, and then you have right here the port number. So the port number in this example is 3000, and then the IP number is 127.0.01. Okay, let's create a server. So if you are currently online now listening to me, please open up your Visual Studio Code. All right, so how I usually like to start when I want to code is, usually I would start by creating a repo on Git, but on GitHub, sorry. But for now, let's just, create a file or a folder on our desktop and call it Node Server. Okay, so I can open up this file. Come here. Inside this box right here, inside this input box here, just type CMD. So with command line now, you can see now that command line is basically inside our folder right now. So inside command line, just type in code dots. Okay, so let me enlarge this. So once your Visual Studio opens, by the left hand corner, by the left side, you will see an icon, a file icon, new file. Click on it, and then we can call this file server.js. Okay, so it has created the server.js file right now. So okay, so the first step, or the first thing to do is to create a variable, an HTTP variable. So HTTP, Node.js comes shipped with a module called HTTP. So modules, you've probably heard of modules before. If you have not heard of module is basically a file exported for use. So I create a file and then I export it for use, for others to use it. So that's the basic definition of what a module is. So let's create a HTTP module. So const HTTP equals require. Then inside the require, we put in the quotes and then HTTP. So now we can now use this HTTP to create our server now. So HTTP module has a method called create server. Like you can see now, these are different methods that HTTP module has. So the one we want to use is create server. So create server accepts a callback function. So in your previous classes, you guys have been hearing of callbacks. So everything is coming full circle now. So HTTP.create server accepts a callback function. So this callback function accepts two arguments called the requests and the response. All right, so before we continue, I would like to maybe talk about something called headers. Let's go back to the slide, please. So when we make a request to the server and when we get a response, sent along with these objects are called something headers, are something called headers. So headers are extra information about request and response. So if you know a bit of HTML, or if in your HTML file you have something called head. So let me create an HTML page here. Index.html. So question mark DOC. Question yeah, okay. So you can see, if you want to know how I did that, I just simply typed with your VS Code. I just simply typed what do they call this stuff again? Exclamation mark, sorry. So exclamation mark and tab will give you the full HTML tags. So inside this HTML tag, or inside this HTML tag, we have something called head over here. So head has some extra information about this HTML file. So you can see the different information right here. So you have title, you have the skill, viewport, and different things. So this is what headers are like too also. So just like in the HTML page, you have the head section, which tells the browser a little bit more about the web page, but it is not actually shown in the browser. So different types of headers or different things you can send through a header is content type. So content type, what are content types? The browser knows what to expect, whether the response is JSON, plain text, or HTML. So content types are basically what tells the browser what to expect, the response to expect from the server. While status are just codes. So they tell the client whether a request is successful or not. So we have different kinds of status codes. We have 200 for OK, 404 for if the page cannot be found, and different others also. So let's go back to the code. So we're going to create headers right now. And how do we do that? We do that with our response. So we have response dots. So if you are typing with me, you will see that VS Code is already giving you IntelliSense. So it's giving you the methods to write already. So the method we want to use here is write head. So response dots write head. And write head accepts the status code right here. So let's create a status code 200. And then the content type also, the content type object. So this is how we create headers. Please be mindful about your capital letters also, please. It's case sensitive. So let's just create a plain text. So there are different types of content type. So one of them is plain text, so which is written as text/plain. So the next thing to do is to send back the response. And how do we do that? We do that by res.end. So in here, we can type our plain text. We can say, hello world. What? Hello world is too generic. Maybe we should do something more custom. Let's say, welcome to Zuri internship. Okay. So we've successfully created a server right now, but right now, Node cannot do anything with this because we've not created our ports yet. So how do we create a port? First, we have to save this code in a variable. So let's do this. So we've saved this code inside a variable right now. So we can now use this variable to create a port by doing this server.listing. So server.listing takes in the port number and then the IP address. So port number, let's use 4000. And then the client's IP address is just the local host. Local host is 127.00.0.0.1. Or if you don't want to do it this way, you could just type local hosts. Anyone, but I prefer to do it this way. All right, so we've created a server now, or we've created a port. So we need to, we need to find a way to, console log a message when the server or when the server is created. So let's just say console.log. Okay, so how do we start up this server? So on your system, if you're using a Windows system, just type or just hold down the control key and then press G for Jesus. So hold down the control key and press G. And then your command line interface opens. So right now you can see that in the command line, we're in the node server file. So what you have to do to start this server right now is to type node and then the file name server.js. Oh, sorry, I haven't saved this file yet. Okay, so save your file and then type node server.js. Maybe I should increase my So if you are viewing this, I hope this is better. I hope you can see my screen. Okay. All right. So now we can head on to our browser now. And then in our browser, type local hosts colon and the port name or the port number, sorry, 4000. So if you've done this properly, you should see welcome to Zuri. So this welcome to Zuri is the message we sent in here, the information we sent in here. So that's how to create a server, create a simple server with Node.js. So let's make this more interesting. So I told you that there are different types, there are different content types. So another content type is JSON. So as backend developers, we use JSON a lot. So when we are creating our APIs, we send JSON, which the front end then uses and consumes in their interface. So let's replicate this and just change this to application /JSON. So now in our res.end, we can now send JSON this way. So we put in backticks. I would explain later why I use backticks instead of this. So put in your backticks and then your JSON data. Let me just do some typical JSON data. Right. So if you've done this, just save it and then restart the server. So you can restart the server by holding down the control key and then pressing C. So Control C will stop the current server, and then you can type node server.js. So the server has started now. Let's head on to the browser. So you can see now that this is JSON right now. Yeah, so it's sending in JSON right now. So another thing we can do is send HTML. So if we want to send in HTML, change this to text/HTML. And then change, okay, let me comment this out. So now our res.end would be HTML. So HTML data. So we can just do basic HTML tags. So put in the body. So let's put in some h1 tag. Let's put in a p tag, p for paragraph. All right, so if you've done this, Control S for save, then restart your server with Control C to stop it, and then node server.js. So refresh this. So you can see now that this is now HTML. How do I know that this is HTML? If you do an inspect on this, you can see my tags, HTML tags. Okay, so let's go a bit crazy with this code. I can write in some CSS to beautify this right now. So inside the body, I put in the style attributes. So let's say background black. This is just basic HTML and CSS right now. Text align center, and if our background is black, we want our text to be white. So color white. Save this, restart, and go back to your browser and then refresh it. So you can see now that, see what has happened now, that it worked. So we've created a server and we've created a basic HTML page inside our server. So yeah, that will be it for the class right now. You can basically use this, play around with this. You can create whatever you want with this basic knowledge. So some people can even create a full app with this, but it will be a bit hectic. So that's why we use something like Express to Express framework, Node framework, Express Node framework to create servers and make life easier for us. But normally you can do this and create a server, a basic server, and play around with the code and create a basic web page. So that will be all for the class right now. If you have